would-be slaves rise up against their captors at sea. The year 1839. The ship, the Amistad.
The first victory for the freedom of African people from enslavement.
164 years later, Western New Yorkers connect with history as the Freedom Schooner Amistad, a recreation of the cargo ship that had carried a human cargo, sails into Buffalo Harbor.
Heave-ho! Heave-ho! Heave-ho!
Buffalo's role in the abolitionist movement, the last stop on the Underground Railroad, made it a fitting port for the visiting Amistad.
Tonight, senior correspondent Rich Newberg takes you on board the Amistad and the insurrection that changed the course of history.
For many, the beacon of hope, the driving force for change, is the church.
And Miles Hairston with the church like you've never seen it before, changing the destiny of African Americans in Western New York.
Considered the cornerstone of Buffalo's African American community, churches are doing it all.
We're kind of like the one-stop shop place for the entire community, especially in devastated communities.
Significant beyond the spiritual because of a community in crisis.
So the church is very, very necessary to help cause stability in families, stability in communities.
That ministry appears destined to answer prayers and open windows of opportunity.
I've been wanting this for so long, for so many women, for myself, something in my own neighborhood.
Tonight, a change of course, taking destiny in their own hands.
It was the 1960s. African Americans stood their ground and demanded equal treatment.
Firemen turned the hoses on the...
Only then did Congress pass the Civil Rights Act, prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin.
Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at...
History had proven that racial oppression could not be lifted without resistance to the status quo. The year is 1839. 49 adults and 4 children from Sierra Leone in West Africa had been held captive on board the Cuban cargo vessel La Amistad, which had been outfitted to accommodate the slave trade. Their long journey from Africa to Cuba started on a much larger ship called the Takura, where they had been crammed together in deplorable conditions and endured beatings and starvation. In the belly of the Amistad, which was heading for the southern part of Cuba, the Africans were able to free themselves of their shackles by using a common nail.
A hand-wrought nail, and if you see any of the shackles of the time, they weren't Schlegg and Mosler and the kinds of locks we have today. They were very, very primitive, and they were able to pick the locks and release themselves below deck.
It was the cook, a slave of the captain, who had told the leader of the revolt, Singbe Pie, that he and the others were destined to be slain and eaten. For Singbe, the threat may have seemed very real.
Here are people with a totally different skin color, hair you've never seen like. Their eyes are strange. They wear weird clothes. They speak a language you don't understand. They come on large floating things with clouds that move them. And they carry these large sticks that spew fire and noise and death. Why would you not believe in the next step that they were capable of being cannibals? You don't know anything about them.
During the revolt, 2 Spaniards from Cuba who had purchased the human cargo to become slaves were spared. They were needed to pilot the ship. But instead of sailing back to Africa, they navigated the Amistad to Long Island Sound, where a U.S. military ship came upon the Amistad. The Africans were arrested and charged with murder. The case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The Amistad captives were defended by former President John Quincy Adams. The court found that since the Africans were never slaves, slavery laws of the time did not apply to them. As to their rebellion on board the Amistad, the Supreme Court ruled they had the ultimate right of all human beings, in extreme cases, to resist oppression and to apply force against ruinous injustice. They were set free and went back to Africa. The Freedom Schooner Amistad, a recreation of the original, sailed into Buffalo Harbor to bring its lessons of race relations to the Queen City, a city known at the time of the Amistad as a hotbed of anti-slavery activity. The ship generates excitement wherever it goes.
This was the pebble in the waters of discrimination and slavery that spread out, and is continuing to go today, because our mission is to get people to talk about race.
Are you ready? Heave! Ho! Heave! Ho!
Citizens of the Niagara region became involved on many levels, sometimes being moved to tears.
Because I can just imagine what Africans that were captured on board this ship, what it was like for them, just not knowing where they were going, what was going to happen to them, and just being away from everything that was familiar to you that you knew. And that's why it's overwhelming.
So I see a woman crying or a man crying, it affects me. It makes me, wow, there's nice people out there. This person feels something for humanity, for a wrong that was done.
Hand over hands. We're gonna get the sail right up in the air.
For children and adults alike, the hands-on history lesson puts them in the cargo hold of the Amistad, where they can only imagine what it was like for Singbe and the others.
They might be sad, and they might be wondering where their mom and dad at, and where are they at, and what's going to happen to them.
Resistance was to become the motto of prominent former slave Henry Highland Garnett, who spoke of the Amistad here in Buffalo at a national black convention in the summer of 1843.
This is a convention at which Henry Highland Garnett will say that American blacks, particularly American slaves, had the right to do what Amistad slaves did. In other words, rise up for their freedom.
But the great orator Frederick Douglass warned against a bloodbath, a debate in Buffalo recalled with the visit of the Freedom Schooner Amistad.
It gives us an opportunity to reflect on Western New York's own history in advancing human rights.
Once the ship leaves, the story doesn't leave. And that we hope that this will also help to change the attitude of individuals here in the city of Buffalo.
And that is the hope of those who recreated the Amistad and those who sail from port to port, reaching out to each visitor who comes on board with freedom's message.
I want them to think, to examine, to realize that we are more alike than not alike as human beings, because the Amistad case was not about slavery. They were never slaves. Not about civil rights. They were never citizens. It's about human rights, the fundamental rights that we all have.
An uplifting Sunday morning. This is the church many people know, preaching the gospel.
You ain't got no business trying to wait for somebody else to pray for you to get a prayer through to God.
Now, if you think you really know the church, think again. The house of worship in the 21st century is not the church of days gone by. And on Buffalo's East Side, people are learning that church service is much more than just Sunday service.
I call it the church beyond the walls.
Greater Refuge Temple's Bishop Robert Sanders is one of the inner city church leaders making a difference. You could say he's taking it to the streets when it comes to investing in and turning around a struggling community.
Investing back in the community, because that's where our people come from.
God, we realize, oh God, that you're able, amen, you're able to speak life into blighted communities.
It's October. A new plaza and new hope comes to this stretch of Buffalo's Jefferson Avenue.
This is our first effort, if you will, in making a contribution to the economic development of this area.
It's a development that turned years of blight and decay into the Greater Refuge Temple Plaza. You may be surprised to learn that with the passing of the plate, churchgoers covered $200,000 of the $250,000 project. Erie County donated $50,000.
Today, we cannot have large treasuries because the money needs to be invested. The people gives money to be invested.
The reality of the situation is that private companies aren't rushing to invest in the inner city. Guided by faith and prayer, churches have become major players in turning neighborhoods around. So much so that people are asking, if the church doesn't do it, who will? To understand the answer, you need to look to the past and beyond religion. Historians say the mission of the church expanded because there was a need. African American Studies professor Dr. Milton Cernett.
This role of the black church was essential because government programs weren't covering these things.
Black ministers tended to be the political and economic bosses in the black community.
In the early part of the 20th century, when African Americans had a very tough time getting jobs, a good word from the minister went a long way.
Often when white industry came looking for black workers, they sought black ministers to validate their congregants.
Black churches have also played an important role in politics. Historians point to the church's leadership in the civil rights movement and the influence the church can have with government leaders.
Practically every politician worth his or her salt knows that you ought to make a stop in at least one of the black churches here in Buffalo.
Humbly, we say that we are probably the major developer in this community.
The developer is St. John Baptist Church, and it's the driving force in the city's Fruit Belt community. Its list of holdings reads like a corporation.
Currently, we sit on 28 acres. We have $30 million worth of physical assets, and that doesn't include the value of the land.
The church is a development machine. There's St. John Tower, which has 150 units. More than 800 people live in McCarley Gardens, named after the church's founder, the late Reverend Bernie C. McCarley. There are also plans to build 300 new single-family homes and 2 senior housing complexes at a cost of more than $50 million.
This isn't for us. This isn't just the St. John members. This is for the community and to enhance the quality of life for the community.
Sitting on the doorstep of the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus, church leaders see an opportunity to create a world-class community.
These ministers have the credibility, they have the support of the neighborhood, and they have the desire to get out of the pulpit, out of the churches and into the streets and make a difference.
And I go to a church within this community, and you stand on their front steps and you look around. It looks a lot different within eyesight of other parts of the community.
I think now, especially in tough economic times, tough educational times, the church has kind of become the everything in the black community. We are requested to do things from health awareness, HIV, to education, enhancement, to economic development, to spiritual growth.
Meeting those needs takes money. That explains why Pastor Darius Pridgeon's True Bethel Baptist Church owns a screen printing company and plans to open a Subway franchise. Yes, that Subway. It may be the first church in the nation with subs and Sunday services.
Not only are we given the spiritual piece, which is our number one piece, but after we've prayed, we need to get up and do something. So not only are we doing the economic development just to have money in the bank, the reason we're doing the economic development is so we can fulfill our mission. And our mission is to help in this community. But it's real hard to help when you're broke.
I got wings on the sticks. This is one of my specialties here.
At the Greater Refuge Temple Plaza, opportunity is made affordable. Donnie Leverett is one of the tenants here. He's fulfilling a lifelong dream with the opening of his own restaurant.
I used to live in this neighborhood a long time ago. It's a good opportunity for the people to work together with the church and rebuild.
Some might see it as an odd pairing, the Bible and barbecue, but for the church, this is not about making money. The rent business owners pay covers the cost of keeping the plaza open.
And so that helps to provide food. It helps to meet emergencies. It helps to help families that are in distress.
The plaza has a variety of businesses. There's a car wash, hat store, insurance agency, and beauty salon.
Brand new. I'm so excited.
Beauty is Carolina Turner's business. She's a member of Greater Refuge Temple and an example of changes the church is trying to make in this community.
Here I am, a single parent, and I'm a grandmother, and he made it so affordable for me, a working person, been working all my life, and now I can afford this.
If Buffalo's inner city is going to survive, if there's going to be a change for the better, many believe the church is the best hope.
I can think of several churches within the east side of Buffalo. If they were removed, the community would almost collapse.
From the pulpit to the people, churches are leading the push for change in the community. Some have schools to shape young minds. There are multi-million-dollar development plans. Others push business opportunities, offering a helping hand instead of a handout. It all comes down to
faith that there is hope. And I think once they see these opportunities to build and to get jobs, that's going to give hope to not just the people in the community, but outside of the community who would like to come back to Buffalo.
Gales Herring comes from a Buffalo family of singers. In fact, all these singers are her brothers and sisters.
I have 8 sisters and 8 brothers. I didn't know we were poor because Mom and Dad were never on the welfare. We never, our clothing was not bought at the Salvation Army or at the Goodwill.
They sing at prisons, nursing homes, and of course, the church.
Not only singing, but singing and preaching and speaking to the people. This is something we've done all our life.
Thank God Almighty!
They were all touched by the civil rights movement, but for Lula, it was the 1955 Mississippi murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till, shot to death for whistling at a white girl, that changed her forever.
I became so prejudiced until one morning I woke up and I said, oh my God, I'm feeling all the hatred that I didn't like in other people. And I asked God to forgive me. And from that day, I never wanted anything to do with racism.
But she still had a need to understand the extremes of racial brutality, and that led her to former slave prisons in West Africa, where she videotaped scenes to keep a record of what she witnessed.
It was here before.
But those dungeons, they were cold. They were stone. It was a jail like I'd never seen before.
So when the crew of the Freedom Schooner Amistad welcomed Western New Yorkers on board to connect with history, Lula Gales Herring had to be there.
God has taught us how to forgive, and at the same time, history has to be told according to how history was.
Lula and her family of singers honor their heritage through song and prayer. They are proud descendants of a people who struggled and toiled and helped build America from the ground up.
History is looking better than ever in downtown Buffalo. Virtually alone on the street sits the home of the late Reverend J. Edward Nash, the longtime leader of the Michigan Street Baptist Church. It's undergoing a $500,000 transformation. Scheduled for completion in late 2004, Reverend Nash's papers, books, and other links to the early civil rights struggle will be available for all to see. The tourism payoff starts in 2005.
National Association for the Study of Black Families will be holding its national convention here in Buffalo because of the Nash House.
And then there's the Michigan Street Baptist Church. It may very well be the church of churches in Buffalo's African-American community. It once served as a gateway to freedom for runaway slaves.
So if you have this building over here, you know.
Bishop William Henderson is the caretaker of the church. A new roof is only part of the vision to keep history alive.
Put some caricatures of slaves against the wall. And a little dim light in there. And then a sound effect where you hear the slaves whispering and saying, "Shh, be quiet, bounty hunters are coming."
A vacant building is just steps away from the church, and the bishop has a dream for the future. It includes classrooms and a library for tourists and children.
Children need to be made aware and need to be proud of their background. I have a yearning. I don't have the money. That's all I need.
Money. $2 million to be exact is needed to turn this 1890s warehouse on Ellicott Street in Buffalo into the Mud Pies Children's Museum. New windows are a sign of progress for the project. Mud Pies Children's Museum, the Michigan Street Baptist Church, and the Nash House all aim to strengthen the foundation and nurture Black history in Buffalo.
Advancement in terms of human rights or economic opportunity seems to come faster when those who are fighting for equality take the initiative and take destiny in their own hands.
That seems to be the lesson of the Amistad and the direction of the African American church in Buffalo. Lives, even the course of history, can change dramatically. I'm Miles Harrison.
And I'm Rich Newberg. Good night.
Hey! 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 Hey!
It's overwhelming.
I can only think that one of them, or maybe more, would say that when we take over this ship, this is for our sons and daughters who may come after us.
We're gonna get the sail right up in the air.
Lives are being changed.
There is a responsibility that God placed in the heart of that leader to do more than just preach and teach spiritual things.
Well, I think people come to the church, especially in devastated communities, because so many others have moved out.
You're taking not only the message about Jesus Christ into the community, but you're also taking a service to that community.